Have you ever stood on the stage you dreamed of for years, clutching the degree you bled and cried for only to realize the three people you love most didn't even bother to show up? That moment is still burned into me like a scar. My gown was heavy, my heels a little too tight, and my heart was thundering, not with pride, but with the crushing weight of an empty row where my husband and kids should have been. I scanned the auditorium again, stupidly thinking maybe they were just late, maybe traffic, maybe the sitter, maybe something that could be explained away. But every second that passed was a needle pushing deeper into my chest. I'd imagined this day so many times, the flash of cameras, my boys holding a "Go Mom" sign, my husband looking proud. Instead, I caught the eyes of strangers in the audience, their polite claps echoing while my seat stayed cold and hollow. If you're enjoying this so far, hit subscribe, tap the like button, and tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I'd love to know. Oh, I should probably introduce myself. I'm Sarah Malik, 34, and for the last 6 years I've been juggling a full-time job, raising 2 boys under 10, and chipping away at my degree in nursing. This happened last spring, the day I thought would be the proudest of my life. I had no idea it would instead rip open every quiet doubt I'd buried about my marriage, my worth, and the choices I'd made. The ceremony dragged on, every name called like a reminder of the family I thought I had. I kept telling myself, don't cry here. Don't give them the satisfaction. Except there was no them, only me, sitting between 2 women I didn't know, pretending that the sting in my eyes was just from the bright stage lights. When it was finally my turn, I walked across the stage with my head high. The dean smiled, the cameras clicked, and for a split second, I forced myself to beam as if the people who mattered most were out there somewhere, cheering. But when I stepped off the stage and glanced at the audience, there was still nothing. No husband shifting in his seat, no kids waving frantically, no one holding up a phone for a video I could treasure later. Afterwards, I lingered in the lobby, watching other graduates embrace their families. Mothers sobbed, fathers clapped their sons on the back, little kids tugged at their parents' gowns. I stood near the wall, diploma in hand, phone cold in my palm. No missed calls. No texts. Not even a "good job." Finally, I dialed my husband, Tarek. It rang twice before he answered, his voice flat, almost distracted. "Hey, what's up?" he said. "What's up?" I repeated, my voice cracking. "I just graduated, Tarek." "Where are you?" There was a pause. Then he sighed, actually sighed. "We couldn't make it. The boys had soccer practice. And honestly, I didn't think it was that big of a deal." I swear, in that moment, the world went quiet. I froze, clutching the phone so hard the edge bit into my palm. Not that big of a deal? For 6 years, my life had been a series of alarms, deadlines, and sacrifices. I'd given up sleep, weekends, even family vacations so I could finish assignments, attend night classes, and study for exams after everyone else had gone to bed. I'd skipped birthday parties to meet clinical requirements, walked to campus in the rain when our second car broke down, and worked extra shifts at the hospital just to keep us afloat. And my husband, the man who had seen me cry over failing a pharmacology test by 2 points, who had held our sons while I studied until my eyes blurred, was telling me this wasn't a big deal. I felt heat rise in my cheeks, but my voice came out steady, almost cold. "You didn't think graduating was worth showing up for?" Tarek made a noise, half a laugh, half a grunt. "Babe, it's just school. You've been in school forever. I figured you'd want to just celebrate at home without all that fuss." The lobby around me blurred. A little girl in a frilly white dress ran past, squealing, her tiny arms flung around her mother's legs. The mother laughed, bending down to hug her, diploma ribbon brushing the girl's cheek. The sight hit me like a punch to the ribs. I swallowed hard. "It's not fuss, Tarek. It's everything I've worked for." This was my day. He didn't respond right away. In the background, I could hear the sound of a TV, the low rumble of a sports commentator. He was at home. He hadn't even tried. I pressed the phone harder to my ear, searching for some sign, any sign, that Tarek was holding something back. His tone wasn't just indifferent. It was checked out, like I'd interrupted him in the middle of something more important. "Where are the boys right now?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. "At practice," he said quickly. "I told you. Tuesday evenings, remember?" Except, I did remember. And I also remembered that their coach had sent an email 2 days ago canceling today's session because of the heat wave. A little white flag of doubt went up in my mind, fluttering in the heavy air of that moment. I turned away from the lobby crowd and stepped outside into the parking lot, the late afternoon sun spilling like molten gold over rows of cars. My gown stuck to my back, polyester and humidity conspiring to make me uncomfortable in more ways than one. "You said practice," I repeated slowly, but I just remembered it was canceled. There was a pause. "Too long." "Oh, right. Yeah, we just kept them busy at home then. They were playing outside earlier." His words stumbled over each other like drunks in a dark alley. Something in my gut twisted. Tarek wasn't a great liar, never had been. If he forgot to pick up milk, he'd spin a story about traffic or parking that unraveled in minutes. But right now, his voice had that brittle edge I recognized from the few times in our marriage he'd tried to keep something from me. I let the silence sit between us until it became uncomfortable. "Tarek, are you sure there's nothing else going on? Because missing my graduation for not that big of a deal feels like there's more to it." He laughed, short, defensive. "You're reading into things." I said, "I'm sorry. What else do you want me to say?" I wanted him to say he cared. That he was proud. That he'd made a mistake, but understood how much this hurt. Instead, I got a tone that told me this conversation was a burden. Behind me, another graduate's family posed for photos against the brick wall of the auditorium. The father was holding the diploma while the graduate adjusted her cap, and they were laughing so hard the photographer had to tell them to keep still. The sound carved right through me. I realized in that instant that this wasn't just about today. It was about every unnoticed dinner I'd cooked after 12-hour shifts, every parent-teacher meeting I'd gone to alone, every time I'd been told, "It's not a big deal," when something mattered deeply to me. And, suddenly, a darker thought crept in. What if he didn't come because he didn't want to be seen with me? I stood in that parking lot, my diploma folder tucked awkwardly under one arm, my other hand still gripping the phone like it might suddenly produce a better answer if I held it long enough. "Tarek," I said again, slower this time, "do you know how many nights I stayed up until 3 a.m. finishing assignments? Do you know how many times I skipped putting the boys to bed so I could study for an exam?" "I know you worked hard," he said, but the words came out with all the enthusiasm of someone reading the weather report. "No," I shot back, my voice trembling now, "you don't know. You couldn't know, because if you did, you wouldn't be sitting at home right now while I'm standing here, alone." A breeze cut through the heat, and I shivered despite the sweat running down my spine. Across the lot, a couple was taking photos by their car. The graduate was balancing on the bumper while her boyfriend held her steady, both laughing. The sight made my throat tighten. "Look," Tarek said, his voice dropping lower, "I didn't think it mattered this much to you. You already got the degree, that's the point, right? Why does it matter if we were there?" "Why?" I wanted to scream. Because I wanted them to be part of the moment. Because I wanted my sons to see their mother accomplish something I never thought I could do. Because I wanted to feel like I had a partner in this life who cared enough to show up. Instead, what came out was a long, shaky breath. "You should know why," I whispered. He didn't answer. I thought I heard the faint clink of glass in the background, like a bottle on a countertop, and my mind flickered to something I'd been ignoring for months. The growing number of beer cans I found in the recycling bin every week. I'd told myself it was just stress. He was working long hours at the garage, inflation was hitting us hard, and we'd barely had a moment of peace since the pandemic. But now, in the heavy silence between us, I wondered if there was more to it. "Tarek," I said quietly, "have you been drinking today?" There was a sharp inhale on the other end. What kind of question is that? The kind I'd been too afraid to ask for a long time. Tarek didn't answer my question about the drinking. Instead, he mumbled something about having to go and hung up before I could stop him. I stood there for a few seconds, staring at the call-ended screen, my own reflection ghosted over it by the glare of the sun. I looked tired. Not the kind of tired a nap could fix, the kind that had been settling into my bones for years. The crowd was thinning now. Graduates were leaving in clusters, some heading toward the restaurant strip across the street, others toward cars packed with relatives. I spotted my friend Layla from the program. She was surrounded by her parents, two younger sisters, and even her grandmother. Her arms were loaded with bouquets, and her dad was juggling gift bags. Layla caught my eye over their heads and waved me over, her smile warm. For a moment, I considered walking away. I didn't want her to see me empty-handed, without a single familiar face in the crowd. But something in me needed to be near people who were happy for someone. I forced a smile as I approached. "Congratulations, Layla." She beamed. "You too. Where's Tarek?" "And the boys." It was like she'd punched me without realizing it. I shrugged. "Couldn't make it." Her brow furrowed, but she didn't press. Instead, she turned to her mom. "This is Sarah. We did our clinical rotations together." Her mother reached for my hand, her grip warm and steady. "We've heard all about you. Layla says you kept her sane during those overnight shifts." I laughed. A real laugh, small but genuine. It felt like a crack of sunlight in the middle of a storm. "Well, she kept me sane, too." Layla's dad pulled out his phone. "Let me take one of you two together. You worked so hard for this moment." I hesitated, but stood beside Layla as he snapped the photo. Her arm hooked through mine, and for just a moment, I felt seen. Not by my husband, not by my children, but by someone who understood the journey. "Text me that picture," I told her. I wasn't sure why. Maybe because I knew it would be the only graduation photo I'd have. As I walked away, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Layla. "You deserved better today, Sarah. Call me later if you need to talk." I held on to that message like a lifeline, not knowing then just how much I'd come to lean on her in the weeks ahead. By the time I got home that evening, the sunset had already bled into a deep indigo sky. Our house sat at the end of a narrow street lined with old maple trees, their leaves whispering in the warm breeze. It should have felt comforting, the place we'd built a life in for over a decade. Instead, the sight of it made my chest tighten. I pulled into the driveway and sat there for a moment with the engine running, staring at the glow in the living room window. The TV flickered against the curtains, and I could hear muffled laughter. Not from my boys, but from whatever Tarek was watching. When I walked inside, the air was thick with the smell of fried onions and something heavier, stale beer, faint but unmistakable. Tarek was on the couch in a faded t-shirt and shorts, feet up on the coffee table, a bottle in his hand. He glanced over at me, expression unreadable. "Hey, how was the ceremony?" I just stood there in the doorway, my graduation cap still in my bag, my gown folded over my arm. "You really want to ask me that right now?" He took a swig from his bottle and shrugged. "I mean, you got the diploma, right? That's the point." I set my things down on the counter, the thud louder than it needed to be. "The point," I said, keeping my voice low but tight, "was that today was the biggest accomplishment of my life so far, and you didn't think it was worth showing up for." He sighed, leaning back. "Sarah, you're blowing this out of proportion." My hands curled into fists at my sides. "Do you even hear yourself? I worked 6 years for this. 6 years, Tarek. Through pregnancies, through night shifts, through every excuse for why we couldn't afford help with the kids. And today? You couldn't give me 2 hours." His jaw tightened. I was tired. "And I didn't think you'd want the boys sitting through some boring ceremony." "There are boys," I shot back. "They should have been there to see what's possible. To see their mother do something hard and finish it. But they weren't, because you decided it didn't matter." The room felt smaller, like the walls were leaning in. The boys were upstairs. I could hear the faint sound of their video game through the ceiling, but the idea of them hearing us made me lower my voice even more. "Tell me the truth, Tarek. Was it really about soccer practice? Or was it because you just didn't want to come?" He looked away, taking another sip. "You're reading too much into it." But that muscle in his jaw kept twitching, and I knew there was something he wasn't saying. I stepped closer, folding my arms across my chest. "No, Tarek. I'm done with the vague answers. I'm asking you one more time, why didn't you come?" He leaned forward, setting his beer down on the table with a dull thud. His eyes flicked up to mine, dark and unblinking. Because I didn't feel like sitting in a room full of strangers clapping for people I don't know. Because I didn't want to waste my day off watching you shake hands with some dean whose name you'll forget in a week. I stared at him, my heart thudding in my ears. So, it wasn't about the boys. It wasn't about being tired. You just didn't want to be there. Exactly, he said, without hesitation. The bluntness knocked the air out of me. For a second, I couldn't even respond. I just kept hearing those words replay in my head. Didn't want to be there. You didn't want to be there for me? I finally managed. I didn't want to pretend I care about something I don't, he said, his tone flat. You going to school, that's your thing, Sarah. Not mine. My throat felt raw, but I forced the words out. Your thing? Tarek, we've been married 12 years. There's no such thing as your thing and my thing. It's our life. And this was a milestone for both of us. Or at least, it should have been. He rolled his eyes, leaning back against the couch. You're making this into some big betrayal. It's not. You're reading too much into it, again. I felt the sting in my eyes, but I swallowed it down. Crying now would give him the satisfaction of thinking I was just being emotional. Fine, I said, my voice low but shaking. You've made it very clear where you stand. I turned toward the kitchen, but he called after me. Don't start with the cold shoulder thing. You know I hate that. I stopped in my tracks. Then maybe you should start thinking about what I hate, I said, my back still to him. And Tarek? I hate feeling like I'm doing life alone while you're just sitting on the sidelines. I went upstairs without looking back, the sound of the beer bottle clinking against the table echoing behind me. When I reached our bedroom, I shut the door quietly and sat on the edge of the bed. The house felt heavy, like all the air had been sucked out. From downstairs, the TV's canned laughter drifted up, each burst more hollow than the last. In that moment, I realized something terrifying. I had worked for years to build a future, but I might be building it alone. I sat on the bed for a long time, the folded graduation gown still in my hands. The fabric was cheap, stiff polyester that smelled faintly of the auditorium, of warm lights and hundreds of bodies packed into one space. I smoothed it out over my lap, running my fingers along the stitch seams, as if that could make sense of the years it represented. I thought about the nights I'd studied in this very room, sitting cross-legged with my laptop on the comforter, whispering dosage calculations under my breath while Tarek snored beside me. I thought about the mornings I'd left before the boys woke up, hoping they'd remember that I was working for all of us. And now, all I had to show for it at home was silence. But the longer I sat there, the more something inside me shifted. I could either spend the rest of the night replaying Tarek's words, didn't want to be there, or I could claim this day for myself, even if I had to do it alone. I set the gown aside and picked up my phone. My thumb hovered over Layla's name. She'd sent me another message an hour ago, still thinking about you. You free later? I typed back before I could second-guess it. Where are you right now? She replied almost instantly. Family dinner at the Lebanese place on 9th. Why? I hesitated, then, mind if I join? She sent a string of heart emojis and the words, of course. Get here. We'll save you a seat. I stood, smoothed my hair in the mirror, and for the first time all day, I felt a flicker of something that wasn't disappointment. Maybe it was stubbornness. Maybe it was the tiniest spark of self-respect. Either way, I wasn't going to let my own graduation night be reduced to sitting upstairs while my husband drowned himself in beer and reruns. I grabbed my purse, slipped my phone into it, and headed for the door. The Lebanese restaurant on 9th was buzzing when I walked in, the kind of low, cozy chaos that wraps around you like a quilt. Warm light spilled from hanging brass lanterns, and the air was thick with the scent of cinnamon, grilled lamb, and fresh-baked pita. The hum of conversation was punctuated by bursts of laughter, clinking glasses, and the sizzle of something hitting the grill in the open kitchen. I spotted Layla immediately. She was at a big round table near the back, her hair loose over her shoulders, her cheeks flushed from laughing. Around her were her parents, her sisters, her grandmother, and 2 cousins I'd never met. They were in the middle of passing around a platter of stuffed grape leaves when she saw me and waved, practically bouncing in her seat. "There she is," she called, standing to hug me. The embrace caught me off guard, warm, tight, unreserved. I hadn't realized until that moment how long it had been since someone hugged me like they meant it. "I'm so glad you came," she said against my ear. "Me too," I admitted. And I meant it. Her mother shuffled over in her chair, patting the seat beside her. "Sit, sit. You must be starving." Before I could even get comfortable, plates began appearing in front of me, hummus drizzled with olive oil, fresh tabbouleh, kibbeh crisp from the fryer. Layla's father poured me a glass of sparkling water with a slice of lemon, insisting I try the lamb shawarma when it arrived. It was overwhelming in the best way. The table was loud, hands reaching across for bread, voices overlapping, everyone talking at once. There was no edge of resentment here, no unspoken judgment, no one making me feel like my achievements were an inconvenience. At one point, Layla's grandmother leaned toward me and asked, "So, what's next for you now that you've graduated?" Her accent wrapped each word in warmth. I opened my mouth, then hesitated. I'm not sure yet," I said honestly. "I think I just want to take a moment to enjoy what I've done before I decide the next step." She nodded like I'd given the perfect answer. "Good. Let life taste in your mouth before you swallow the next bite." It was such a simple sentence, but it hit me like a revelation. I'd spent so many years racing from one thing to the next, marriage, kids, school, work, that I'd never really let myself savor anything. As we ate, I found myself laughing more than I had in months. At one point, Layla reached across the table, touched my arm, and said, "Sarah, I'm proud of you. You inspire me." The words landed deep, settling somewhere I didn't even know was hungry. And in that moment, I knew, maybe for the first time, that support doesn't always come from where you expect it, but it's worth seeking out wherever it lives. By the time I got home, it was close to 10 p.m. The street was quiet now, the maple leaves barely stirring under a heavy, humid stillness. I unlocked the front door and stepped inside, my heels clicking against the hardwood. The TV was still on in the living room, casting a dim blue light over the walls, but Tarek wasn't on the couch anymore. I noticed his shoes by the door, kicked off haphazardly, and the faint sound of movement in the kitchen. When I walked in, the first thing I saw was the open fridge, light spilling over his back as he leaned inside. The second thing I saw was the counter, littered with 4 empty beer bottles and one half finished, sweating in his hand. "Hey," he said without looking up, his voice slow, edges slurred just enough for me to notice. "Hey," I replied, hanging my bag on the chair. My eyes swept over the mess, crumbs scattered near the sink, a plate smeared with something greasy. The smell of onions was still lingering, but underneath it was the sharper, almost sour tang of beer. "How was dinner?" he asked, still rooting in the fridge for something. "Good," I said. "Layla's family invited me." "It was nice." He snorted without turning around. "Bet you told them all about how your husband's the worst guy in the world for missing your big day." I paused. I didn't have to. People notice when someone's alone at their own graduation. That made him straighten up and finally face me. His eyes were glassy, a flush creeping up his neck. "So what, you want me to grovel? Get down on my knees? Buy you flowers and beg for forgiveness?" "I want you to care," I said, my voice sharper than I meant. "I want you to at least act like the fact I graduated means something to you." He set the bottle down hard enough that foam slid up the neck and spilled over. "I care about paying the bills. I care about keeping the boys fed. You think sitting through a boring ceremony makes me a better husband? Newsflash, it doesn't." The heat in my chest flared, but underneath it, something colder was settling. The kind of cold that comes when you realize someone's not just failing you in the moment, but they've been failing you for a long time, and maybe they don't even see it. I leaned back against the counter, crossing my arms to keep from shaking. "Tarek, this isn't just about tonight. It's about the fact that I can't remember the last time you looked at me like you were proud. Or even interested." He picked up the beer again, took a long drink, and wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. "Oh, here we go," he muttered. "Don't dismiss me," I said, my voice tight. "Do you think I wanted to go to school for 6 years while working and raising kids? Do you think I didn't want more nights off or more time with them? I did this for us. And you couldn't even give me 2 hours to celebrate it. He laughed, but it wasn't the kind of laugh that came from humor. It was sharp, defensive. You did it for you, Sarah. Don't pretend this was some selfless act for the family. You've been chasing this degree like it's gonna magically fix everything. Newsflash, it won't. The words hit me in a place I didn't expect. My stomach tightened. You think I went through all of that just for me? I think you wanted to prove something, he said, shrugging. And you don't need me for that. I stared at him, my throat tightening. I needed you to show up. That's all. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he grabbed another beer from the fridge and popped the cap with his thumb, the sharp pist of the seal breaking loud in the quiet kitchen. I counted the bottles lined up on the counter, 5 now. Tarek, how many have you had tonight? He smirked, leaning against the counter opposite me. What, you keeping score now? My chest felt tight. I'm serious. This is getting worse. Don't start, he said, his voice low but with an edge that made my skin prickle. You're not perfect either, Sarah. You've been so wrapped up in school you forgot you have a husband. I blinked, stunned. So missing my graduation was, what? Payback? He didn't answer. Just stared at me, unblinking, like he was daring me to say more. And for a moment, I felt small, like the walls were pressing in, like I was the one who'd done something wrong. That was the most dangerous part, realizing how easy it was for him to make me doubt myself, even when I knew I was right. I took a deep breath, steadying my voice. You know what, Tarek? You're right about one thing. I have been wrapped up in school. And do you know why? Because I was building a future where we wouldn't have to scrape by every month. Where the boys would see their parents working towards something better. Where I could actually stand on my own 2 feet if I had to. His smirk faltered just slightly, but he hid it behind another sip of beer. I didn't just get a degree, I went on. I got proof that I can finish what I start, no matter how hard it gets. And if you can't be proud of that, then I'll be proud enough for both of us. He rolled his eyes. There it is, Saint Sarah, the martyr. No, I said, my voice sharper now, not a martyr. Just someone who's finally realizing she deserves more than crumbs of attention and empty excuses. That got his attention. His gaze flicked to mine, more alert than before, like he was registering that I wasn't speaking from a place of pleading anymore. I was drawing a line. You think you can just talk to me like that? He said, setting the bottle down with a hard clink. I think I just did, I replied. My heart was hammering, but the words felt solid in my mouth. And I'm done letting you make me feel small for wanting something better. For a moment, the air between us was taut, almost electric. The sound of the boys' laughter drifted faintly from upstairs, an eerie contrast to the tension in the kitchen. I stepped toward the doorway. You can finish your beer. I'm going to bed. And tomorrow, I'm going to start figuring out what comes next, with or without your help. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like the one retreating. I felt like the one walking away on my own terms. The bedroom was dim when I walked in, lit only by the soft amber glow of the lamp on my nightstand. I shut the door quietly, muffling the sound of the TV downstairs. For a moment, I just stood there, breathing in the stillness, letting my pulse slow. I sat on the edge of the bed and pulled my laptop onto my lap. My fingers hovered over the keys. I didn't even know exactly what I was searching for, only that I needed a way forward. First, I opened my email and clicked through the dozens of unread messages from the university. Buried in the stack was one from the Career Center. Congratulations, graduates. Here's your guide to the next step. I clicked it open and began scanning the list of job boards, networking events, and local hospital openings. Every listing felt like a tiny lifeline, a reminder that I had options now. That I wasn't trapped in this house, in this marriage, in this version of my life where my accomplishments were dismissed. But as the tabs multiplied across my screen, so did my thoughts. I needed more than just a job. I needed a plan, one that didn't rely on Tarek's approval or participation. I pulled out a notebook from my nightstand, the same one I'd used to jot down study notes during long lectures, and started a new page. At the top, in bold letters, I wrote, Life after graduation. Underneath, I began listing ideas, apply to at least 5 positions by the end of the week. Update my resume and LinkedIn profile. Reach out to Layla for references. Start setting aside a small emergency fund, even if it's just $20 a week. That last one made me pause. Money had always been a joint matter in our house, and Tarek had never been keen on the idea of secret accounts. But if I was serious about having options, I needed to protect myself. I leaned back against the pillows, pen tapping against my notebook. My mind flickered to the boys. This wasn't just about me, it was about showing them what strength looked like, even when it was quiet, even when it happened behind closed doors. Somewhere downstairs, I heard the faint crack of another beer bottle opening. It didn't make my chest seize the way it had earlier. If anything, it only solidified what I was writing next. Stop waiting for him to change. Start building for yourself. The next morning, the air was heavy with the kind of late spring humidity that makes even the walls seem damp. I moved quietly through the kitchen, careful not to wake the boys before school. Tarek's snoring drifted from the couch. He hadn't even made it upstairs last night. An empty bottle rolled slightly when I stepped near the coffee table. I brewed my coffee in silence, sipping it by the window while the sun climbed lazily over the rooftops. My notebook from last night was still in my bag, its pages tugging at my thoughts. When my phone buzzed, I nearly ignored it, expecting another spam text, but it was from Layla. Morning. I just thought of something. Our clinical supervisor mentioned there's an opening at Memorial General. Full-time. Good benefits. She's on the hiring committee. Want me to put your name in? I read the message twice, my pulse quickening. Memorial General wasn't just a hospital. It was the hospital in our city, the one with the highest pay scale, the one where nurses could climb into leadership positions within a few years. I typed back before I could overthink it. Yes. Please. Thank you. Almost instantly, done. She said they're looking for someone who can start in 2 weeks. You'd be perfect. 2 weeks. My stomach flipped, excitement tangled with fear. This could be the step I'd been dreaming of, but it also meant big changes. Longer hours. More independence. And maybe, just maybe, enough financial stability to not feel trapped anymore. I closed my eyes for a moment, picturing it. Walking into that hospital in scrubs, my badge clipped to my pocket, my own paycheck covering the bills without having to ask permission for how it was spent. Then, uninvited, another image slipped in. Tarek's reaction. I could already hear him. You're really gonna take a job that keeps you away from home even more? The arguments. The guilt. The way he'd turn my ambition into a selfish act. But this time, I felt something different. A quiet, steady defiance. I was done asking for permission to want more. I opened my notebook and, under last night's list, wrote a single word in all caps: apply. The boys came downstairs a little after 7, still bleary-eyed, hair sticking up in 100 different directions. I moved through the familiar routines: cereal bowls, juice glasses, lunchboxes, but my mind was somewhere else entirely. Every time my phone buzzed, my heart gave a little jolt. It was like my body already knew this job wasn't just another application. It was a door, and if I stepped through, things at home would never be the same. When I walked the boys to the bus stop, I found myself glancing down the street toward the small strip mall, where the bank branch was. My emergency fund plan from last night kept looping in my head. I could open an account in my own name, deposit my first paycheck there, start building my own safety net. Just thinking about it made my palms sweat. Back at the house, Tarek was in the kitchen nursing a mug of coffee. His eyes were puffy, his t-shirt wrinkled, a faint sourness on his breath. He glanced up as I came in. Where'd you go? Bus stop, I said, setting my bag on the counter. My voice was casual, but my pulse was quick. He grunted and went back to scrolling through his phone. That was my opening. He was only half present, the way he usually was in the mornings. I slipped my laptop out of my bag and sat at the table, angling the screen away from him. My hands moved fast, muscle memory guiding me through the Memorial General online application. Name, address, education history, license number, clinical experience. References: I added Layla's name and our old supervisors. My heart was thudding so loud I was sure he could hear it, but when I risked a glance at him, he was still staring at his phone, oblivious. Then came the final box, available start date. 2 weeks. That was fast. It would mean rearranging the boys' schedules, possibly clashing with Tarek's work hours, not to mention the inevitable argument when he realized I hadn't discussed it first. My fingers hovered over the keys. I thought about the look on his face last night when he told me he didn't want to be at my graduation. How easy it was for him to strip the meaning out of something I'd fought for. I typed the date. Hit submit. The confirmation screen popped up, crisp and final. Your application has been received. I closed the laptop slowly, the weight of what I'd just done settling in. For the first time in months, maybe years, I'd taken a step entirely for myself. But that step came with risk. Because when Tarek found out, I knew there'd be no pretending things were fine anymore. It only took 2 days for the secret to start unraveling. I was in the laundry room, folding a basket of clean clothes, when I heard Tarek's voice from the living room, louder than usual, laced with that edge that meant trouble. Sarah. I stepped out, heart already thudding. What? He was standing by the front door, holding a plain white envelope in his hand. My eyes dropped to the return address. Memorial General Hospital, Human Resources Department. For a split second, I considered lying, pretending it was a random piece of mail or some kind of mix-up. But his expression told me that window had already slammed shut. You applied for a job? His voice wasn't just loud, it was incredulous, like the idea itself was an insult. Yes, I said, forcing my tone to stay even. It's a nursing position at Memorial. Layla told me about it. He shook his head, letting out a laugh that wasn't even close to amusement. So you were just gonna, what? Take a job without even talking to me? I was going to tell you once I had something to tell, I said. Right now it's just an application. That's not the point, he snapped, stepping closer. The point is you made a decision that affects this family without me. The way he said this family made my stomach twist. I thought about all the decisions he'd made. Buying a motorcycle we couldn't afford, skipping the boys' school conferences, deciding to drink away half his weekends, all without me. You mean without your permission, I said quietly. His eyes narrowed. Don't twist this. You already spend half your life away from home with work and school. Now you want a job that's gonna take even more of your time. Yes, I said, my voice sharper now. Because it's a good opportunity. Because it's what I've been working toward all these years. And what about us, huh? His voice rose. What about me? What about you, Tarek? The words came out before I could stop them. You couldn't even be bothered to show up for my graduation. Why should I factor your comfort into a decision about my future? For a long moment, we just stared at each other, the air thick between us. I could see the muscle in his jaw working, his grip tightening around that envelope. I knew this wasn't the end of the fight, it was only the first strike. Tarek's fingers tightened around the envelope until the paper crumpled. You're making a mistake, he said, his voice low but vibrating with anger. No, I replied, just a study. The mistake would be letting you talk me out of this. His eyes flicked over my face, searching for a crack, a sign that he could still bend me back into place. For years, I'd given him that, hesitations, backtracks, compromises I didn't really want to make. But this time, I held his gaze without flinching. You think you can just run off and do whatever you want now because you've got some piece of paper, he asked. I stepped forward, closing the space between us. No. I think I can do what I need to because I finally believe I can stand on my own 2 feet. He gave a short, sharp laugh. And you think that's strength? Yes, I said simply. I do. The room went quiet except for the faint hum of the fridge. I could hear the boys upstairs, their muffled voices drifting through the ceiling. That was the anchor that kept me steady, knowing they were watching, even if they didn't realize it yet. I reached out and took the envelope from his hand. His grip resisted for a moment before letting go. I smoothed the paper, tucked it under my arm, and walked toward the stairs. Where are you going? He called after me. To get ready for my future, I said without looking back. It wasn't a dramatic exit. No slammed doors, no screaming. Just the quiet, deliberate act of choosing myself, one step at a time, up the staircase and away from the man who'd made my proudest day feel like nothing. Later that night, after the boys were asleep and the house had gone still, I sat at my desk with the lamp casting a small pool of light over the notebook from a few nights ago. The page at the top still read, "Life after graduation." My pen hovered over the paper, but instead of adding new bullet points, I found myself tracing over the words, pressing them deeper into the paper until the indent showed through the back of the page. I thought about the stage under my feet, the sound of strangers clapping, the empty row where Tarek and the boys should have been. I remembered the weight of the diploma in my hand, how it had felt like both an accomplishment and a question. What now? Back then, I'd been hurt, gutted, even by their absence. But now, sitting here, I realized something that startled me. If they had been there, smiling and cheering, I might have mistaken it for proof that we were okay, that my marriage was whole. Instead, their absence had stripped away the illusion. I reached for my laptop and opened the Memorial General Careers portal. My application was still there, marked submitted. Just seeing it filled me with a steadiness I hadn't known in years. Because the truth was, I'd been living like my life was on layaway, waiting for the right time, for the right support, for someone else to say, yes, you can. But nobody was going to hand me permission. I had already given it to myself the moment I hit submit. I closed the laptop, slid the notebook back into the drawer, and whispered out loud to the quiet room, to the girl I used to be, to whoever needed to hear it, you did it. And you're not done yet. 2 weeks later, I walked through the glass doors of Memorial General for my first shift. The lobby was wide and bright, sunlight pouring through the tall windows, the hum of conversation and the distant beeping of monitors filling the air. I adjusted the strap of my bag and clipped my new ID badge to my scrub top. My name, Sarah Malik, RN, gleamed under the plastic. As I made my way to the elevator, I caught my reflection in the polished metal doors. My hair was pulled back, my eyes steady, my shoulders squared. This was the same woman who had stood on that stage in a polyester gown, scanning the crowd for faces that never appeared, but she wasn't waiting for anyone to validate her anymore. The memory of that empty row still stung, but now it felt different. It wasn't a wound anymore, it was a marker. The point on the timeline where I stopped expecting my worth to be measured by who showed up for me. In my pocket was a folded piece of paper from my notebook. Last night, before bed, I'd torn out the page that said "Life After Graduation" and rewritten it. At the top, in fresh ink, it now read, "Life That's Mine." Underneath, there were no bullet points, just one sentence: keep moving forward, no matter who's watching. As the elevator doors slid open, I stepped inside and pressed the button for my floor. My hands were steady. My heart was sure. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel alone. If you've stayed with me to the end, thank you. And if you've ever had a moment where you looked around and realized the people you thought would be there weren't, know this: you can still stand up, walk forward, and build something that's yours. Don't forget to subscribe and drop a comment telling me your city. It's always fun to see where our stories travel.